You're only looking from here up. You're making a mistake. Now, we started to realize how bad inequality was when the Occupy movement was going on, didn't we? Because the Occupy movement, we ran around with the Occupy movement, and I'm sure some of you were there. I was. We yelled, "We are the 99%." And the 1% is getting all of everything, and we're not, you know. So the Occupy movement made it very, very clear to us that inequality was getting much worse. And for that, we should be very grateful. But as far as like what we're going to do about it, they didn't really have much of a solution. I mean, just going to live in tents wasn't exactly a solution that was going to, you know, really make a difference. So we owed them for having called our attention to inequality. Then came Bernie Sanders, which shook the world. It's still shaking the world. Now Bernie Sanders also is looking at this same period, from Reagan on, more or less. And he explained not only that inequality is getting worse, but he told us how it's happening. You know, things like tax cuts, things like taking people's pensions, things like union busting. He showed us the nuts and bolts of inequality and how inequality was happening. And he recommended new nuts and bolts that would be better programs, you know, that would help. And for that, we should be grateful. I'm going to tell you that both of them were wrong.
Amen.
All of them were wrong because they were only looking at this part of the graph. They didn't have Piketty. This was before Piketty. Piketty's book was published in 2015. And he showed that this little period here, when inequality was low, was not normal. He showed that prior to that time, ever since the beginning of capitalism up to now, inequality got worse. And since 1973, or since this period here, inequality has gotten worse. And that's normal. What's not normal is when inequality went down. Just this little 40 or 50 year period in here, that was what was not normal. That's why I'm telling you, things are worse than you think. We're not going to just start electing good people and get back to these good old days. If we had, perhaps the election of President Obama would have solved all of our problems. In fact, some people thought it would solve all of our problems, didn't they? Obama got elected with Democratic majorities in both houses. And yet inequality continued. Inequality is still going up. It's going through the ceiling. And Mr. Piketty assures us that it's not going to change. Now, a lot of economists, not on our side, some economists tell us that capitalism has a natural balance to it and everything's going to come back, you know, or maybe it's like a pendulum or something, you know, or a circle, and things will come back around. That's bull. That's baloney. What is going to happen is that inequality is going to get intolerable. That's what Mr. Piketty says, and I think that's what serious economists since 2015 are saying, that rising inequality is the natural state of this kind of the economics that we live under. It's going to get worse. It's going to continue to get worse until it gets intolerable. That's the bad news. Now, as to why did we have this oddball period when inequality went down? Well, Mr. Piketty says that it was due to certain shocks to the system, and governments adjusted to those shocks in progressive ways.
What was it?
One of the shocks was
What was those years again?
this is 1910 and this is 2010.
The years that it dipped
The big dip here in America was 1935,
to 1980. Okay.
from 1935 to 1980 in America. And in Europe and everybody else, it kind of goes like that. But it still shows big inequality going down during the middle of the century.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. I was talking about why. Mr. Piketty says that there were shocks. And these shocks included a major depression and a world war, and then another world war. And governments made adjustments to those world wars, particularly by raising taxes. You know, when World War I started, taxes on businesses in America were low. And when Mr. Roosevelt got elected during the Depression, he raised them, doubled them, more or less. And they kept going up so that when I was a child, the top level of the progressive income tax was 90%. When I was a child. Was it 94? Okay. So they raised taxes, and they raised the luxury tax. They raised what's the tax on stocks? Capital gains tax. That was 55%, as I recall, when I was in high school and college. So they made those adjustments, and because of these shocks, according to Mr. Piketty. That's wrong.